Welcome back, once again, adventurers, to Let's Play Chaos Child. In the last episode, Takuru took Kurusu on a midnight walk, hoping to finally get some real answers as to why she was lying about certain aspects of her friendship with Senri Minamisawa. But then, as if she'd been waiting this whole time for such an opportunity, Serika Noe made another appearance. And this time, she had a weapon that was much worse than her D-sword. A weapon that shook Kurusu to her very core. That weapon was the story and revelation of a truth that would ultimately shake Takuru Miyashiro to his very core, and then some. That Nono Kurusu isn't the person who Takuru and everyone else thought she was. That she is in fact the long believed to be dead Senri Minamisawa. And that the real Nono Kurusu died in the Shibuya earthquake instead of Senri. And on top of that, Senri's supposed wish to have everything, to be everything that Nono Kurusu was, in tandem with the awakening of her own gigalomaniac powers, allowed her to do so not just figuratively, but literally as well. Which would mean that Senri has been living as Nono Kurusu for the past 6 years. This whole time. But even in the wake of Serika's relentless assault, Takuru continued to believe in Kurusu. But even so, the following morning, he called Detective Shinjo to confirm the disquieting suspicions that he has never been able to fully rid himself of. Suspicions that are tragically proving themselves in Serika's favor. Because, as it turns out, the one who identified the certain body in the Shibuya earthquake as being that of Senri Minamisawa was listed as Nono Kurusu herself. With that said, Shinjo was able to get a big favor from the forensics department, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the body that Kurusu supposedly identified as Senri's wasn't actually hers, as the DNA didn't match either of Senri's deceased parents. Which unfortunately is giving credence to Serika's accusations. No, that's not the right word. But anyway, this information is definitely testing Takuru Miyashiro more than anything else in this entire ordeal. He motioned for me to flip to the next page.
当時 身元不明で DNA 鑑定に回された遺体は348名。
So basically, what Shinjo is saying is that the forensics department was overburdened by unidentified corpses from the Shibuya earthquake, which ultimately would have made a comparison extremely difficult on their end.
そのデータを詳しく検証してみた結果、それらの中からおそらく南沢千里と母子関係だと思われる極めて近い DNA を持つ遺体が見つかった。
After all, Senri's parents weren't the only parents who perished in the earthquake.
母子関係。
But as Shinjo said, those 348 bodies were all listed as unidentified. In other words, it was the mother of the dead girl. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all that forensics analysis was able to glean. Only that they were a match, but it doesn't give any further information. In other words, there is no way to link the mother body as being as being the mother of the real Nono Kurusu.
その人は
Shinjo took a sip of water to wet his throat. His next words were clear and unmistakable. Was I wrong about that last thought?
クルスユカ子。渋谷地震で圧死したクルスノノの母親だ。
Yukako Kurusu. There it is. Not that we really should have had any doubts. She put on a brave face in front of Sarako Noe, even in the face of all those revelations, but she made one fatal mistake. She made the mistake of thinking that, actually, now that my memory thinks about it, or maybe not, but what I was about to say is that, no, she should have been aware. I'm pretty sure that she knew that Sarako could easily tell what she was thinking. But maybe she didn't think hard enough on that. Maybe she thought that Sarako could only read people's intentions, what they were about to do. But that was her mistake, because Sarako doesn't just read people's intentions. She can see into the hearts of people in ways that even Hanae Arimura cannot. She could see the truth beneath the mask. But Takuru chose to believe in her nonetheless. But sitting here with Shinjo, right here and now, with this final piece of information, we can't deny it anymore. Sarako Noe was right. The person who we believe to be Nono Kurusu, all this time was in fact Senri Minamisawa, and the person who had died was the real Nono Kurusu. We knew this. After everything that Serika had said, we knew this. And it still hurts. Everything went black. I thought again and again about what he was telling me. The mother of the body they thought was Senri Minamisawa was actually Nono Kurusu's mother. Which meant, since the girl was a match,
Minamisawa Senri のものと思われていた遺体はクルス・ノノのものだった。
The only reason that the police came to that conclusion was because Senri, as Kurusu, had told them that, and they believed her. After all, they didn't really have any reason to do otherwise. Until now. I didn't even recognize my voice as I spoke.
それは間違いないことなんですか？
As I said during the previous episode, adventurers, of all the outcomes, of all the twists and turns, of all the plot threads that ChäoS Child has laid upon me up until this point, this was a scenario I never expected. Not at all.
データは寡黙に、だが雄弁に物語っている。
If Shinjo says that it's beyond question, then it's beyond question. You can only fool forensics so far. I mean, it's not impossible, but there is a limit.
Minamisawa Senri は親友が死んだことを悲しむどころか、これ幸いとあっけなく切り捨て、Minamisawa Senriとして慰霊碑の下に葬った。
Except that that's not entirely true, is it, Serika? Because even under the guise of Kurusu, Serika was sad. Actually, even before then, Serika was... Senri. I keep getting confused because their names are similar, kind of. But anyway, back to my point. Serika is wrong here. Senri Minamisawa was sad, devastated when Kurusu died in the earthquake. And even after she adopted Kurusu's identity, Senri still went to the earthquake memorial each and every time. With feelings of guilt. Because her own name was embedded on the memorial plaque. But the person who was buried under that name was Kurusu herself.
そして自らは美しく明るく聡明で誰からも好かれるクルス・ノノとして第二の人生を謳歌していたんだよ。
At first, one might be tempted to take what Seruka is saying at face value. But unlike Seruka, Senri's reasons were not nefarious. She may have been jealous of Nono Kurusu, but Senri didn't hate her. She hated herself. That was why she wished to be Nono Kurusu. But she never wished for Kurusu to be killed in the Shibuya earthquake, crushed beneath rubble. That was never her intention. Disregarding the fact that it ultimately did morbidly help her toward that end. Seruka's voice echoed in my head. Then that was the truth. The unmitigated,
私を
incontrovertible,
信じてくれるよね。
the incontrovertible truth. Senri may have wanted us to believe that she was Nono Kurusu, but after what we've just learned, we have to break that promise. What? What the hell? She told me to believe her. Why did she tell me to believe her? As much to convince herself as you. The pain you're going through right now, Takuru Miyashiro, is one thing. But unfortunately for Senri, her defense mechanism is still in full effect, keeping her from realizing and remembering and understanding the reality of what happened to Kurusu all those years ago.
おい宮代君、ひどく顔色が悪いが大丈夫か？
You could say that we've been through a lot.
はい。
Indeed, this is too much to process for Takuru. But we don't have a choice.
とりあえずこの結果についてだが、
それなんですが、どうするかは少しの間僕に預けてくれませんか？
そう言うだろうと思ったよ。
すみません。
It's understandable why Shinja would be upset. They are police forensics reports after all. They are police property.
まあいいさ。だがそのままにしておくわけにもいかない。いずれ時が来たらきちんと処置は取らせてもらうからな。
Fair enough. And we can't stop him if he does.
はい。
That's the price we pay for such
やれやれ。
information.
俺もとんだお人よしだな。
Getting flashbacks to what Seruka was saying before. God damn it. Shinjo kept talking after that, but I couldn't hear a single word he said. All I could sense was that some dark thing was sinking into my stomach. I staggered back home like a zombie in a graveyard. We've been surrounded by lies, delusions, and deceptions. For 6 years. 6 long years. The lead weight in my stomach got heavier. There was a feeling inside me that I didn't recognize at all.
おかえりタクル。どこへ行ってたの？
Breaking this to Yuto and Uki is going to be beyond painful. When they realized that the person who they thought Kurusu was, the person Kurusu should have been, is nothing more than a complete stranger. Nono was smiling at me like always, but I could tell she was trying to judge my mood. That only upset me more. It was obvious now what she was afraid of. And we can't keep playing pretend. We have to do something. Anything.
タクル？
Nono Kurusu. The person I'd always thought was Nono Kurusu. She had us all fooled. Takuru, Ito, Yui, Yuto, Sakuma, Wakui, Shinjo, Mio, even Kawahara. This is going to be the huge shock. That the person that he'd believed himself to be in love with, albeit for his own twisted, selfish reasons, in reality is the one person who he despised. The girl I'd always thought of as my stepsister. But we can't. It's gone on for far too long, Senri Minamisawa. This has to end. She was really...
ねえタクル、どうかした？もしかして気分でも悪いの？
You know the answer to that question. My ears started to ring as she spoke. Lumps of emotion collided and fought within me.
どうしたの？タクル兄ちゃん、病気？
I know what I said about breaking the truth to Yuto and Uki. I take it back. I really do.
お布団敷きましょうか？
Or rather, I wish I could, but I can't.
いや、それより二人はちょっと外で遊んできてくれないか？
Yeah. It's too soon.
う 外ですか？いいの？ちょっとタクル、何言ってるの？この前セリカが来たばっかりじゃない。二人だけで行動させるなんて危険よ。
Then it's the alternative.
アパートの近くなら大丈夫だろう。その代わり何かあったら大声出すんだ。いいな。
うん、わかったよ。ウキ姉ちゃん、行こう。
Really wish it didn't have to come to this. We've been so insistent that they stay inside that they were probably eager for any chance to get out. They were gone before Nono could even finish her sentence.
ちょっとタクル、どういう。
お前に話があるんだよ、クレス。
Kurusu's expression tensed when she'd heard what I'd call her. Yeah. There's no way she wouldn't have known that Takuru referred to her by her last name instead of her first name. But that makes me wonder, would the real Nono Kurusu have acted the same way? Would she have cared whether or not Takuru referred to her by her first or last name? Tragically, an answer that we shall never know. I had to say it. I had to ask. I had to know. If we were going to stay like this, if Kurusu was going to stay Kurusu, if we were going to be a family, it was best that I didn't ask. But it's too late for regrets. We've been carrying regrets all this time.
ついさっき新庄さんに会ってきた。
新庄さんに？どうして？
調べてもらったんだよ、南沢千里の死について。
Laying it all out on the table. All our cards. I thought she'd get angry or be surprised. But she listened to my words without changing her expression at all.
ここに DNA 鑑定の結果がある。南沢千里だと思われていた遺体の。
I tossed the brown envelope on the table. But Kurusu didn't move to pick it up. She just said 2 words.
そう。
That was all. Why did you do that? Why did you do that when you told me you believed me? I was expecting her to say that. But she didn't. Instead, I was the one who spoke.
どうして？
No hiding now.
どうして言い訳しないんだよ。どうして否定しないんだよ。
だってタクルの中でもう結論は出てるんでしょ。
That we do. Though I'm surprised you gave up so easily.
だけど否定してくれよ。違うって言ってくれよ。それじゃ認めたみたいじゃないか。
Even if she denied it, that wouldn't change a thing. And she knows that. I'd probably get mad that she was still lying. But even if I knew it didn't make sense, I still wanted her to say I was wrong. I wanted her to deny it. I still held on to a sliver of hope. I wanted to cling to the slightest chance that she had something that would make me think the DNA test was wrong. But instead, all she said was,
ごめん。
in other words, she admitted it. She admitted she wasn't really Nono Kurusu. I took my anger out on the table in front of me.
なんだよそれ。
As if the return of the new generation madness wasn't enough. As if what Seruka, Sakuma, and Wakui had been up to wasn't enough.
なんなんだよそれ。どういうことなんだよ。
Now this.
落ち着いてタクル。
How can he?
これが落ち着いてなんていられるかよ。
お願い話を聞いて。
It's the last 6 months all over again.
嘘だったんだな。最初から全部嘘だったんだ。家族だって言ったのも大切だって言ったのも。
タク
家族の間で隠し事はなし。よく言えたもんだな。自分は正体まで隠しておいてよくそんなこと言えたもんだよ。
ル。違うのタクル。
違う？何が違うんだよ。何が違うって言うんだよ。
私だって騙すつもりはなかったのよ。嘘をつくつもりなんてなかった。
And yet, for better or worse, you did. You did lie. You did deceive.
でもあなたと出会った時には私はもうクルス・ノノだったから。もう二度と南沢千里には戻りたくなかった。あなたたちに嫌われたくなかったから。だから。
Senri was forcing the words out.
でも騙そうとしたんじゃない。本当はずっと苦しかった。私は本当はクルス・ノノじゃない。そう言いたかった。でもそれが分かったら今の生活が失われるって。 明るくて誰からも好かれるクルスノノじゃなく、陰気で気味の悪い南沢千里だって分かったら、タクルに嫌われるって。
Now there's bitter irony for you. All this time, Takuru Miyashiro had believed that Senri Minamisawa hated him for all eternity for abandoning her when she was being experimented on. And yet all this time, Senri herself had the same thought about Takuru.
そう思うと怖くて、本当のこと言えなかった。騙そうだなんてそんなこと、それだけは信じてほしい。
信じてほしい。
Those words shook me even more.
信じてほしいだって。
I'd lost the ability to control myself. I'd lost the ability to control what I was saying.
裏切ったのはそっちじゃないか。父さんや母さんの時だってそうだ。ずっと僕を騙して。もうあんなことは二度とない。そう言ったよな。それも嘘だったってことじゃないか。
それは。
家族の間で隠し事はしない。そう言って自分は一番大事なことを隠して、それで信じろだって。信じられるわけないだろ。お前のことなんて今さら何も信じられるわけない。
タクル。
Senri's eyes were overflowing with tears, but I couldn't stop myself from speaking.
なんだよ。信じ合うのが家族とでも言いたいのか。だったら僕たちはもう家族じゃない。二度と家族面しないでくれ。
Unfortunately, the truth hurts. After all, the only members of Aoba Dorm who were ever truly siblings were Yui and Yuto. The only family members who until the tragedy still had each other. Until Yui's murder. But other than them, Takuru, Senri, and Uki were just, well, everyone in Aoba Dorm were just orphans, adopted by a man pretending to be kind but in fact was himself a callous, insane, mad scientist. They were never a true family, even as they lived as such. I let it all out. When I was done, there was nothing left but emptiness. But even after that, I still couldn't forgive her. Her tears, her words, they all seemed like lies. So,
ごめんなさい。
I watched as Kurusu turned and ran out of the room, but I didn't try and stop her. Smashing my fists into the table wasn't going to change anything. But I slammed my fist into it over and over again anyway. I think Mio was going to be very angry at some point. If she were here.
なんだよ。なんでこんなことに。
Seruka betrayed me. Kurusu had lied to me. Sakuma would be on that list, but he's dead, so everything I thought I had was turning against me. It was laughing at me as it fled away. I didn't know what to believe anymore, let alone who. I didn't have anything left to believe in. Seruka said she'd committed all those murders for me. Kurusu had said she didn't want me to find out her secret.
なんだよ。それじゃ元を正せば全て僕のせいじゃないか。
In a manner of speaking. I'd wanted a case that would shake the whole world. A case that would have been interesting, exciting even, intriguing of all things, and yet Takuru Miyashiro, that selfish wish would have severe ramifications and consequences. I'd wanted a family. That's why all this had happened, right?
なんだ。そっか。悪いのは僕だ。
From start to finish. It was my fault for being here. It was me that was making everyone miserable. That is not entirely true, however. Not everything is your fault. The victims of the return of the new generation madness. Yui, Ito, Seruka, Kurusu. It was all my fault. Yes, I know that I neglected to mention Sakuma's name there. Maybe I should just go away. Maybe I should just go disappear. And now it's come to this. This is exactly what happened with Takuru's parents. He wished for them to disappear, and then they did. And then Seruka appeared. But if Seruka is being true to her stated reason that everything she is doing is for Takuru's sake, now that Takuru has wished for this, Seruka is only going to be far too happy to oblige. Which is a terrifying thing.
頼むよ。誰でもいい。僕を 僕を消してくれ。
And now Takuru Miyashiro has gone full Takumi Nishijo. For anyone who has followed my Let's Play of Chaos Head, this is some very memorable deja vu for me.
この世から僕を消してくれ。頼むよ。
Be careful what you wish for, Takuru. Serika might just give it to you.
聞いてるんだろ、尾上。それが僕の願いだ。だから。
I could hear someone open the door and run into the room. Was that Serika here to grant my wish?
タクル兄ちゃん、今ノノさんが。
They saw her.
ノノ姉ちゃんと何かあったの？
I really do not want to answer that question.
タクルさん。
The two of them were looking at me concerned. But I didn't have the energy to answer them. Senri didn't come back to the apartment that night. November 22nd, 2015. It's almost December. And falling rain. Looks like Senri has returned to Aoba Dorm. One last time. What was I doing? The rain had started to fall, and the next thing I knew, I'd come here. Wait. Senri is referring to herself in the first person. Huh. I changed out of my wet clothes and into the old uniform I kept in the back of the dresser, then looked around the room once more. They closed the place down, but they hadn't changed the locks or put a chain on the door. I'm surprised she managed to sneak past the patrol cars, if there are any stationed around here. The spare key was in its usual place. Of course she would remember it. They should have just let us stay here for a while more then, but that wasn't possible. If they had, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Not as far as Serika Noe was concerned. It was never going to last. Was it, Senri? I desperately tried to drive thoughts from my mind once more. Unfortunately, cognitive dissonance isn't going to save you from this mess. It never was. Anyway, thanks to the key, I'd made it inside easily. I knew it was wrong, but I'd come here anyway. I had too many memories here. I needed to come here to say goodbye to my past. All the furniture was still here too. It was much the same as when we'd lived here. But since there was no one to clean it, dust had built up on the shelves, tables, and floors. I softly ran my hand along the desk, and a streak of brown appeared under a thin layer of white. Who would have thought it would get so dusty if no one was here for such a short time? The day we left, it had felt like we were never coming back, and I've been terribly sad.
ただいま。
Aoba Dorm, the only place in which Senri Minamisawa ever truly considered home. I whispered softly. Of course, no one answered. The place was empty. But still, this was where everything I had was kept. Everything I had is Nono Kurusu. You can't take it all with you. I hated myself, the person named Senri Minamisawa. I'd always been alone, ever since I was a kid. At recess time and daycare, everyone would go out to the playground and play on the swings and slide. But I'd like to stay indoors and read books. And she's wearing very similar hair ties to Hanai Arimura. No, I don't think I actually liked it. I just pretended I did so I wouldn't have to interact with other people. Even at a young age, I already thought that any interactions with others meant pain and sorrow. It's a very terrifying thought to have. That didn't change in elementary school. Instead of changing, my introverted personality got worse. Now, after having lived as Nono Kurusu for years, I knew. If you try and stay in your shell, everyone will ignore you. But you don't have to do that. There's so many fun things around you. Yeah, except you never got to experience those things as Senri Minamisawa. If only you could. There's so many friends you can enjoy them with. I was always alone. That didn't mean I was bullied. Unless you count people like Kawahara. For as long as I can remember, I'd always been worried about what other people thought of me. I was good at avoiding becoming a target. Up to a point. I tried my best not to stand out. I tried my best not to make anyone mad. Somebody else with very similar behavioral patterns as Takumi Nishijo. That was my life. But I still hated myself. I hated the girl named Senri Minamisawa. One day, I talked to my mother about it.
お母さん、私もっとみんなと仲良くなれるようになりたい。友達がたくさんできる。そんな性格になりたい。
Thinking back, that was my first mistake. That was when my own personal hell began. She took me to a lab. She told me if I went there, they'd fix my shy personality. artificial personality alteration doesn't count as fixing. It was a lab that was related somehow to the pharmaceutical company where my dad worked, and deeply related to that weird cult my mother believed in. So Senri's father was probably enrolled with Nozomi. That would explain quite a bit. At first it was just simple psychological tests. All the doctors there were nice. Technically speaking. When the tests finished, they gave me candy. I started to look forward to going there. I was a child. I was a fool. At first, Dad was opposed to me going there, but after a while he almost never came home anymore. Mother said that he was too busy with work. And then the experiments began to get more serious. Looks like upper management put their foot down. They would force my eyes to stay open as they showed me all kinds of weird images. The Rorschachs. They made me listen to this weird, creepy static for hours on end. Well, if this isn't brainwashing, I don't know what is. Hot things, cold things, sour things, spicy things, nasty things, nasty things, nasty things, painful things. Very painful things. Again and again and again. Hence, Senri's file that we found in the basement. She's got some notes there. Something days ago. Dry cough, nose runny, I think. And of course, speaking of Nozomi, once again attesting to the fact that Genichi Narose was the very person running the experiments on Senri Minamisawa. That other miserable piece of shit. Who is now dead. They put weird machines on my head. Exactly like the ones that they used on Ayase Kishimoto. And also you know, I should remember her name, but it's been a while, alright, adventurers? Don't worry, it's coming to mind. Just give me a minute. Sarah, that was it. We all know who I'm talking about. At least I hope you all do if you followed my, sorry, Senna. It was, or rather, Senna's mother. Yeah. They gave me drugs. Basically, yeah. They were using the, Noah 2 technology. They gave me dozens of shots of my arms. When my left arm turned purple, they'd use the right. When the right arm turned purple, they'd use the left. Rinse, repeat. No matter how much I cried or screamed, no matter how much I said I didn't want to go, she told me it was my task in life to go there and be experimented on. Psychological brainwashing, that's one thing the Church of Divine Light was good at. Also helps if you have a twisted personality like Ganeshi Narose in your corner. What they were doing there was special. I was chosen. So I couldn't tell anyone else. That's what she said. Never mind the fact that she wasn't the only one who was being experimented on as a gigalomaniac. Nozomi certainly had a lot to answer for. She wouldn't listen no matter what I said. But Dad. Maybe Dad would. Or perhaps the situation would turn out the same way that it did with Senna Aoi and her father. Sorry, her father, I should say. I long to meet my father. Back to Senri again. And then one day I saw him in the middle of an experiment. When I finally saw my father again, he was like a different person. Not the way he looked, the way he felt. Before, he'd been so opposed to me going to that facility. But now he said the experiments were for my own good. They got to him. Ganeshi Narose worked his own neuroscientist's magic. I was a small child with nothing left to believe in. The drugs ruined my skin. My hair would fall out sometimes too. I'd lost the few friends I had. Then one day, the scientists were all very happy with the results of the experiment. He was happy too. I didn't care. I just wanted to get away. Unfortunately, when it comes to Nozomi and Narose, once they're done with their experiments, those involved are used and discarded. And then the experiments got even worse, so they weren't done. They gave me shots. My whole body hurt. I thought I might die. I fought back for all the good that it did. They tied me to a chair and in a straitjacket, no less. They put a weird device on my mouth. I couldn't even say it hurt anymore. And then I thought I saw someone looking at me from the door. That's when it happened. That's when Takuru Miyashiro locked eyes with Senri Minamisawa.
助けて
And she cried for help.
誰か見てるならお願い助けてお願い
But there was no one to hear my voice. No one came to save me. Because Takuru was so terrified by what he saw, he ran away. because he too was a child at that time, just like Senri. I fell into despair. Despair at the past, despair at the present, despair at the future. There was no hope there, only pain and suffering.
生きるのがこんなに辛いなら私はもう生きていたくなんてない。
A certain philosopher once said that life is pain. To live is to suffer. I could mention him by name, but I won't. It's kind of become a cliche at this point in time. If I'm being truthfully honest, I longed for death. And then it happened. She spoke to me for the first time.
大丈夫？
So they still allowed her to go back to school instead of just keeping her confined.
顔色悪いよ。保健室行く？
That was when they met. Senri and the real Nono Kurusu.
どうしたの？
This is certainly an out-of-body experience, if ever there was one.
うん、
Or
大丈夫。
rather, that should be if ever I saw one.
本当？うん。あ、私クルスノノ。あなたは？南沢千里。千里だね。よろしく。よろしく、クルスさん。
Senri and Kurusu. Two opposites.
ノノでいいよ。みんなそう呼んでるし。
So now we know. That was Kurusu's true personality after all. She was so loved by everyone that she was on first-name basis with everyone.
ノノ？
Then perhaps the real Nono Kurusu might have been surprised at Takuru Miyashiro being the only person ever to refer to her by her last name instead of her first. Surprised, but probably not overly upset. Maybe. She was the single ray of light in my dark life. Nono was always cheerful and smiling. She was nice to everyone. There was always a circle of people around her. I couldn't bring myself to try and join that circle. But Kurusu did. I just had to sit there and watch. But whenever I did,
千里ちゃんもおいでよ。一緒に遊ぼう。
she would shout to me, much to a certain Kawahara's annoyance. I could see the people around her frown. Nono must have known too. Some of them would just walk away when I went to join the group.
いいよ、そういう人は放っておけば。だって私たちお友達でしょ。
She really was like that in life.
友達？私とののちゃんが？千里ちゃんはそう思ってくれないの？うん、そうじゃないけど、私でいいの？何言ってるの、当たり前じゃない。
Of course I could. Those words made me so happy. They kept me going. Senri Minamisawa's sole motivation. They saved me, or so it seemed. Nono was cute and popular with the boys, which isn't always a good thing. Kawaharu and the other boys would gather around her. They were all after Nono. I knew they didn't like me. Sometimes they'd say that the only reason I existed was to make her look better. Even though that's the only reason why they hang around Kurusu, was they believe that she's there to make them look better. But I didn't care. I knew Nono didn't think that way. One day, Nono asked me a question.
千里ちゃんはいつも早く帰って何してるの？
I had no idea what to say. What do you say when the answer is so very convoluted? By that time they were doing the experiments on weekdays too. I was going to a weird place where they did creepy experiments. She had told me not to tell anyone, but if I told her she might think I was weird, but maybe I could tell her.
うちってね、お母さんしかいないの。だから休みの日はいつもお手伝いばっかりなんだ。
So she didn't tell her after all. I was surprised. Noto had always seemed so happy. Wait, unless... Wait, was I reading that wrong? Did I mistakenly read... Did I mix up what Kurusu and Senri were saying? I don't know anymore. I didn't know she had any problems at all.
もしかして千里ちゃんも同じ？
Oh, okay. So Kurusu was the one who was speaking the conversation. Yeah. So in other words, at this point in time, yeah. So Kurusu's father is at work, leaving Kurusu and her mother home by themselves doing chores. Unfortunately for Senri, she never had that life. Maybe Nono felt sympathetic to me. When I thought about that, I couldn't tell her the truth. And it made me feel a little better to think that I wasn't the only one suffering. And then I started to hate myself. Nono was honestly worried about me. So how could I feel that way? But still I was jealous of Nono. She was cheerful and pretty and smart and everyone liked her. A recipe for jealousy. I looked up to her more with each passing day. I started to think that I wanted to be Nono, but that was never going to happen. And the more I started to feel that way, the worse the experiments got. I never told anyone, but word started to get around that I was going to some weird lab. All those rumors about Amy spreading like wildfire. My skin dried and cracked, my hair fell out. Eventually I stopped being able to move my legs like I wanted to. And then came the day of November 6th, 2009. The day that Ganeshi Narose unveiled his true experiment on the unsuspecting Shibuya. I was undergoing another painful experiment that day. On my way back, I became very dizzy and collapsed. I thought it was a side effect of the drugs they'd just given me, but it wasn't. Everyone on the streets of Shibuya had fallen over and was crawling on the ground like me, as the entire city was now in ruin. The buildings collapsed, the trees on the side of the road fell over, cars and trucks lost control and collided. The whole city turned to hell in an instant. I didn't know what had happened. The experiments had caused my legs to shrivel up, and I couldn't walk right. Someone in the fleeing crowd pushed me over and I had to drag my wounded body home. She was dead. It had happened so fast. She had that same self-satisfied smile on her face that she always had. Because she belonged to the same twisted cult as the likes of Nurse Hazuki and Mamoru Suwa of the Shibuya Police Department. This is for your sake. This is a sign of your faith. Those were the words she'd always said when she'd made me suffer. And now she was gone from the world without suffering at all. I felt a feeling that I'd never felt before. It wasn't sorrow or loss. A while later, someone came from the facility to tell me that he had died as well. He'd been unlucky enough to be in Shibuya for a meeting during the earthquake. I still didn't feel sad. At the same time, the people from the facility told me to evacuate to the hospital. I'm surprised they even cared. They've been showing me these strange pictures, and had seen some kind of symptoms develop, they said. They didn't want to lose a valuable guinea pig. Even with all that going on, I could tell what they were thinking. So they didn't care. They were dead. There's even no point in referring to Senri's parents by their usual appellations at this point. Did I still have to undergo more experiments? Did I still have to suffer? Even after Ganeshi Narosei's twisted ambition brought ruin upon Shibuya, and would ultimately end in failure thanks to the efforts of Takumi Nishijo and the other gigalomaniacs. There was nothing left to tie me down anymore. I smacked away the big hand that stretched out for me and ran. I kept running, not even knowing where I was going. Lost in the chaos. I still don't know how I ran on those legs, but somehow I found the strength. Something I was going to mention is that it's not entirely unlike Riko Haida, or by that I of course mean Senri's condition, except for the fact that the only difference being that only one of Riko's legs was badly injured, whereas thanks to these inhuman experiments, both of Senri's legs have atrophied after all those drugs and confinement. I didn't want to go back to that lab, ever. That was enough to keep me going. And after I turned down many corridors and scrambled over a bunch of rubble, I found her. But why was she there? Of all the worst possible outcomes, of all the cruelest fates, Kurusu Makase was one thing. Mayuri Shina was another. But this... Nono Kurusu. This is far too cruel. Even buried in the rubble, she was beautiful.
Senri-chan... Nono-chan, 大丈夫？今助けてあげるからね。
I couldn't just let her die. Anna was my best friend. And more than anything, she was the person I wanted to be. If she died here, I'd have nothing left to live for. I desperately tried to move the rubble off her and save her. Unfortunately, in her condition, that was easier said than done. But I was too weak. That's right, there was nothing I could do. I didn't want to abandon her. There was nothing I could do.
痛い。痛いよ、センリちゃん。
As more time passed, blood started to trickle out through the rubble, and her voice began to get smaller.
お母さん。お母さんは？
I looked around and saw a grown-up's feet poking out from under the rubble behind her. So Kurusu was lying as well when she was mentioning the chores at home with her mother. How else would that explain why the two of them were down here in this... No, wait. They would have gotten out. Sorry, I had a bit of a mind fade there. Because Senri had actually made it out of the underground laboratory and she's away from Tokyo General Hospital now. So, never mind, just disregard that last thought. They seemed like a woman's feet.
お母さんなら無事よ。
Yeah, so Kurusu didn't lie. No. But Senri did.
よかった。
But then again, at this point, lying to protect something is the only reflex that Senri has.
だからののちゃんもセンリちゃん。
This is too painful. Nono grabbed my arm. Her hand was surprisingly cold. She lost a lot of blood, and losing more by the second.
いやだよ。私死にたくない。死にたくないよ。
I said this before, and I will say it again. There is a very terrifying parallel between Nono Kurusu's final moments and the final moments of Kurusu Makase on the Beta World line.
ののちゃん。ごめんね。お母さん。私もう。
Tears poured down her face as she slowly closed her eyes.
ののちゃん。
The strength left her hand.
ののちゃん。あ、ののちゃん。ののちゃん。
She's gone. Nono Kurusu is dead. No matter how much I cried, no matter how hard I hit her cheek, she didn't move. I cried. Nono's death meant the death of the person I looked up to. It meant the death of my hope. It may have well meant my own death.
ののちゃん。私ののちゃんになりたかった。
Even in death she was pretty. But what about me? My hair was a mess. My face was covered in soot. I must have cut my face somewhere too.
どうせ死ぬなら 私が死ねばよかったんだ。
And yet, fate was not so kind.
ののちゃんの代わりに私が死んでしまえばよかったんだ。
And then I saw something strange. All those negative feelings. It was like the wings of a huge bird, soaring through the skies, or the hands of a holy mother, coupled in prayer. Organic, yet inorganic. I was so entranced by it that I hadn't even realized that someone had come up to me. Did you see a little girl? She was about your age, looks kind of gloomy. It was one of the men who had come to take me to the lab. But by that time it had already happened. And since the scientists aren't gigalomaniacs, they can't see the D-sword. Even though they're aware of its existence, they can't see it or perceive it unless it's real-booted. But I wonder, if that scientist had been paying more attention, maybe he would have noticed the body of the real Nono Kurusu lying buried beneath the rubble. But it seems like that's not what happened. When I didn't say anything, he sighed and walked off. It didn't make sense. Weren't they looking for me? That they are. But unfortunately, thanks to your wish, your internal desire, Senri Minamisawa, you had managed to escape your fate. I gasped in surprise at something I saw in the corner of my eye. It was a piece of glass embedded in the wall of a collapsed building. I could see Nono reflected in the pieces. But Nono was right at my feet. Surprised the scientist didn't notice that. The Nono in the glass was looking at me in surprise. I took a step closer. And so did the girl in the glass. I tilted my head and so did Nono. Indeed. Like the proverbial phoenix from the ashes, Senri Minamisawa had been remade, reborn, as Nono Kurusu. I turned into Nono. But the real Nono is still lying dead beneath that concrete rubble. I looked around for something else that would show my reflection. I picked up Nono's phone off the ground and used it to take a picture of myself. And just like the piece of glass, the photo would reflect the reality. I was Nono. I couldn't believe it, but it was real. Not just a real Buddha delusion. For all intents and purposes, Senri's physical appearance had been altered
私が
to Kurusu's.
ノノちゃん
Of course, with that said, would her power actually allow her to resume her original appearance? I mean, I'm sure it could, though I doubt that Senri would ever want to go back to looking like her original self. What had happened? Did it have something to do with that headache? Or that white light? Or that weird sword I'd seen? Maybe it was because of those awful experiments. The correct answer is all of the above. But it didn't matter.
このままノノちゃんになれば
Because Nono Kurusu was Senri's only motivation for living. And so her path was set. If I could become Nono, then I wouldn't have to do any more experiments. I'd be free of the chains of pain, sorrow, and loneliness that bound Senri Minamisawa. I could spread my wings as Nono Kurusu and fly off into a beautiful blue sky. If only you hadn't... If only you'd never met the man known as Wataru Sakuma. But then that would have meant never meeting any of the others as well, never even going to Aoba Dorm. Flames were already spreading from the collapsed building.
ノノちゃんごめんねごめん
And there's the real Nono Kurusu, still dead. I apologized again and again as I dragged Nono's body out of the rubble and put it in the fire. The smell of burning hair and flesh stung my nostrils, and it was only then that I realized what I was doing. Trying to hide the fact that she had taken on Nono's appearance. I quickly tried to grab her body and pull her out, but it was too late. Soon her body had turned to black ash, and I passed out. When I woke up at the hospital, a new life as Nono Kurusu awaited me. All my classmates, including Kawahara, came to visit me. They were nicer to me than they'd ever been to Senri Minamisawa. Of course, yeah. That wasn't due to the fact that they actually gave a damn about Nono Kurusu. They just wanted to bask in the glory and attention. Nothing more, nothing less. Fortunately, no one questioned if I was really Nono Kurusu. I mean, why would they? Nono had been buried as Senri Minamisawa based on what I told the police. Until, of course, the day that Takuru Miyashiro and Takeshi Shinja would finally uncover the truth. Even in that unprecedented disaster, I still thought they might get more suspicious. I was astonished how easy it was. Well, considering the fact that they were dealing with a national travesty and tragedy, that's actually not that surprising, Senri. For a while afterward, I felt guilty at how worried everyone was about me. I was terrified they'd find out. My personality in particular wasn't something I could quickly change. I'm sure a lot of things I said struck people as wrong. But time was on my side. And fortune. Everyone simply decided that I was traumatized at the loss of my mother and friend, and was actually even nicer to me. And at some point I got used to pretending to be Nono Kurusu. I mastered the role and stopped feeling guilty. Soon I really was Nono Kurusu. That was about the first time I saw the boy in the coma named Takuru Miyashiro. And she recognized him. After that I was taken in by Aoba Dorm. And then Yui and Yuto came. Takuru came, still in his coma. I took care of him every day. I nursed him. We fought. Soon we opened up to each other. And we became a family. All those precious moments and memories were all predicated on a lie, a self-delusion. Takuru left the dorm. We became a family again. We stopped being a family, and in the end, I stopped being Nono Kurusu. I was back to being Senri Minamisawa, the girl who lied to her family for years. But
じゃあ私はどうすればよかったの？
she didn't really have a choice under the circumstances. Was I supposed to go back to that lab as Senri Minamisawa? You don't have to worry about that anymore. That lab is completely abandoned, dead and gone. Nobody's ever going back there ever again. Be experimented on as a gigglomaniac? Spend my days suffering in that damn building without anyone ever loving me? And die as a guinea pig with no happy memories, no warmth at all? Was that what I was supposed to do?
だったら私は何のために生まれてきたの？
I wanted to live. I wanted to be happy. That was all.
私だって分かってたよ。
I knew that it was all a lie. All the smiles, all the kindness, all the friendship. It was all for Nono, not Senri. It wasn't for me. It wasn't for Senri Minamisawa. You've been living as somebody else for 6 years. Takuru's voice echoed in my mind. His rage, anger, and frustration.
嘘だったんだな。最初から全部嘘だったんだ。家族だって言ったのも。信じられるわけないだろ。今さら何も信じられるわけない。
And yet it wasn't all a lie. If he knew the real me, if he knew Senri Minamisawa, would he accept me?
ねえタクル、私はどうすればいいの？これからどうすればいいのかな？
Only you can answer those questions. What could I do now? What was important to me?
私は
And now we're back here with Takuru Miyashiro, sitting forlornly in Mio Kunisato's apartment building. So when we return, adventurers, where do we go from here? As always, until next we meet,